On this Friday night, judgment for human smugglers after the death of an Indian family. The verdict in a Minnesota courtroom for the actions of two men. How they left a family with children to freeze to death in a Manitoba field. A leader of the so-called Freedom Convoy also gets his verdict. The prison time he may face and the chaos outside the courthouse.
You'll be going to charge for harassment, you stupid.
Plus, the ridiculous cost to see Taylor Swift in Canada. The calls to crack down on ticket price gouging. And one man's trash is another man's travel method.
That, quite frankly, absolutely should not be going in the landfill.
The young engineer recycling the power of vaping.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Two men have been found guilty in a human smuggling case where an Indian family froze to death in a Manitoba field. All four members of the Patel family died in January 2022 while trying to walk across the Canada-U.S. border. The case played out in front of a jury in a Minnesota courtroom, with the prosecution arguing the men were part of an international ring they called immoral. Melissa Ridgen reports on the verdict, which the jury reached very quickly.
That's right. Jurors in Minnesota only took part of the morning to find two men guilty of running a complex human smuggling ring involving Indian nationals across the U.S.-Canada border with little apparent regard for the lives of those involved.
This trial exposed the unthinkable cruelty of human smuggling and of those criminal organizations that value profit and greed over humanity.
These are the victims of that cruelty, Jagdish and Vaishaliban Patel and their children, 11-year-old Vinanji and Dharmik, only 3. It was minus 36 with biting wind in this southern Manitoba field on the night in January 2022 when they were left here by smugglers and told to start walking. They were part of a small group put in a blizzard with almost no visibility. They became separated, winter coats not enough to insulate from the frigid chill. They were found later, frozen to death, having succumbed to the cold just meters from the U.S. border.
This case is a stark reminder of the horrific realities faced by victims of human smuggling.
The prosecution argued Harshkumar Patel, not related to the Patel family who died, and Steve Shand were part of a larger smuggling ring that saw Indian nationals first brought to Canada, then sent walking across the border into the U.S. They've now been convicted of 4 counts, including conspiracy to bring aliens into the United States. And illegal migrations persist. Between January and September of this year, U.S. Border Patrol arrested more than 14,000 Indian nationals on the Canadian border alone.
I think it's really important that we kind of keep going back to that this is a humanitarian issue. These are not people who, are trying to just take advantage of the system, but people who don't really have other options.
Border security is a priority for the incoming Trump administration. Concerns about mass deportations could push more people to seek unsafe pathways across.
The men now face sentencing up to 20 years on the 2 most serious smuggling convictions. That sentencing is expected in March after pre-sentence reports are completed. Carolyn.
Melissa Ridgen in Winnipeg, thank you. One of the most prominent figures of the so-called Freedom Convoy has been found guilty of 5 charges in connection with the 2022 protests that brought downtown Ottawa to a standstill. Pat King was found guilty on charges including mischief and disobeying a court order. Mackenzie Gray was in the Ottawa courtroom and outside for the emotional reaction.
Somebody say freedom! He was a convoy kingpin. And now Pat King has been found guilty of 5 charges for his role in the protests that paralyzed downtown Ottawa. King was found to have committed mischief predominantly for a slow roll of the Ottawa airport with dozens of trucks, which he organized.
Stay strong, yeah. Hold the frickin' line. Don't worry about this. We got this.
King's frequent online videos, key evidence for the Crown, and used to inform Superior Court Justice Charles Hackland's decision, finding King also guilty of counseling mischief, counseling obstruction of police, as well as 2 counts of disobeying a court order. King appeared in court in person, and while he didn't speak,
are you planning on killing Mr.
his roughly 2 dozen supporters did.
Get out!
some pushing and swearing at journalists who attempted to speak with King, but his lawyer took a more measured approach.
It was a very thoughtful and very reasoned decision by a very learned judge, and we look forward to dissecting it, reviewing it.
Natasha Calvino, who told the court King owes her legal fees, had argued the police barricaded protesters in downtown Ottawa, preventing them from leaving the city, a claim that was rejected by Justice Hacklin. The evidence is clear that the protesters and their leadership had no intention of voluntarily leaving the city. He also blamed Ottawa law enforcement for failing to promptly deal with the convoy. The police stood by, observing, and remarkably declined to intervene, Hacklin wrote. King was found not guilty of 3 counts of intimidation and obstructing police, but even with that, King is facing up to 10 years in prison.
Charge of mischief, it doesn't sound very serious. Like, mischief is something that a misbehaving child can get up to. But in criminal law, mischief is a very serious offense.
King's legal team will seek to avoid jail time, instead ask for time served in probation, Carolyn. Sentencing is scheduled for January 16th.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. Next week's sentencing hearing for Donald Trump in his hush money case has been delayed and may not happen at all. Today, a New York judge adjourned the sentencing and did not set a new date. Trump's lawyers want the case dismissed. The judge ordered Trump's legal team to file their argument for dismissal by December 2nd. Prosecutors will have a week to respond. In May, Trump was convicted of falsifying business records connected to a hush money payment made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Just days after announcing his controversial cabinet picks, Donald Trump is already replacing some of the candidates he put forward, swapping out his pick for Attorney General after Matt Gaetz bowed out. Other candidates are also facing serious doubts about their viability. As Jackson Proskow reports, that hasn't stopped Trump from pressing ahead with his government in waiting at a historically fast pace.
Weeks before taking office, Donald Trump has suffered his first major setback after Attorney General nominee Matt Gaetz withdrew from consideration over multiple accusations of sexual misconduct and drug abuse. Late Thursday, Trump announced former Florida AG Pam Bondi as his new pick.
Donald Trump very much wants to break with the norm that the Attorney General is primarily responsible to the country. He wants the Attorney General to be primarily responsible to him and to his administration.
Bondi tackled the opioid crisis and was a central figure both in Trump's impeachment defense.
That hypocrisy is astounding.
And his 2020 election lies.
Our votes are being suppressed.
She's far more likely to be confirmed. Other Trump picks still hang by a thread, including Pete Hegseth, nominated as defense secretary, facing accusations he sexually assaulted a woman.
I'll keep this very simple. The matter was fully investigated.
Senator, did you talk to him about the sexual assault allegation?
The controversial choices have rankled the halls of Congress, but so far haven't put Trump's agenda off course. In fact, half a dozen less prominent appointments suggest the new administration may be preparing to implement parts of Project 2025, the 900-page plan for overhauling the U.S. government developed by a conservative think tank.
This Project 25.
Trump disavowed any links to the plan during the campaign.
I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it.
Now he's appointing some of the project's authors to key roles. Brendan Carr at the Federal Communications Commission, Pete Hoekstra as ambassador to Canada, and Tom Homan as border czar. Though some more extreme Project 2025 contributors have been spurned. Washington is now in a tense waiting game to see what Trump and his cabinet picks actually do once they're in office. As is so often the case, promises can be far more bombastic than actions. Carolyn?
Jackson Proskow in Washington, thank you. Donald Trump's pick for Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may have influenced a decision made in Montreal last night. Municipal officials voted to stop adding fluoride to all tap water, something that Kennedy has proposed for the U.S. Most of the city has already been drinking water without fluoride, but 2 treatment plants in the West Island have still been adding it. The high cost of fluoridation and questions about health effects were cited as reasons for the removal, though medical officials say it's a safe and effective way to reduce tooth decay.
Obviously, pressure from some citizens was at the base of the decision that was made somewhat irresponsibly by the city of Montreal just recently. We do know that the rhetoric behind that decision was completely false.
A petition to remove the fluoride was started by a Concordia University student who claims he has Kennedy's support. Vaccine skepticism has many doctors fearing the growing spread of measles, which has hit its highest point in Canada in 9 years. At least 30 new cases were reported this week. 27 are in New Brunswick, part of a larger outbreak linked to international travel and a lack of immunizations. The other 3 are in Ontario. So far this year, there has been 130 cases of measles reported across the country. In 2023, there were just 12. Ontario has become the latest province to sign on to the Liberal government's National School Food Program. Ottawa is providing more than $108 million over 3 years to fund school nutrition programs in that province.
We've now reached a deal that's going to deliver healthy meals to 160,000 Ontario kids more over the coming year. This is a huge difference. We're talking about close to 10 million meals just for the rest of this school year, and obviously much more for the coming years as well.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the funds will also help lower costs for food transportation, storage, and preparation. The National School Food Program was unveiled in April's federal budget. It will deliver meals to 400,000 kids across Canada every year. Ontario is the 3rd province to sign on, following Newfoundland and Labrador and Manitoba. There are growing calls for the federal government to step in and end a week-long labor disruption at Canada Post. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business says the strike is impacting tens of thousands of small businesses across the country at a crucial time. They're urging that back-to-work legislation be introduced. It's a move that could be critical for the survival of the Postal Service as it reveals yet another round of losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Neethu Garcha reports.
One day stronger, one day longer. It's been more than a week since 55,000 postal workers across Canada walked off the job, and now Canada Post is sounding the alarm over what it says is a mounting financial crisis.
We're in the ballpark of losing $1 billion a year.
In third quarter financials released Friday, the corporation reported a $315 million loss, more than $25 million more than the previous year's loss in the same quarter. Parcels revenue fell by $46 million or 5.8% this year, while parcel volumes dropped by 6 million pieces or 9.6%.
What we are focused on in this round of negotiations is getting into that competitive game where we can provide 7-day-a-week parcel delivery.
The corporation cites fierce competition in the parcel delivery market, with rival companies offering faster, cheaper options. The union says the corporation's cost structure is already out of sync with industry standards.
They want to change the model which they use to just have part-time workers, and we're not in support of that. So we're trying to find a way that we could work with Canada Post to ensure the business grows, but not on the backs of workers.
In a letter on Friday, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business said the strike is having a negative impact and called on the federal government to immediately intervene to put an end to the labor disruption. The federal labor minister's office telling Global News it's monitoring the situation closely.
We're going to be working throughout the entire weekend to try to get 2 collective agreements in place.
For now, like mail delivery, the 2 sides remain at a standstill. Neethu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Fed up with paying thousands to see one of the world's biggest pop stars. Coming up, how Taylor Swift's time in Canada is raising pressure to crack down on ticket price gougers.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know volcano must be exciting for you, but please remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened.
Some striking images from the sky as a volcano in southwestern Iceland spewed lava for the 7th time in less than a year. Iceland's seismic monitoring team said the eruption started with little warning late Wednesday and created a long fissure. Still, it looks to be smaller than eruptions in May and August. Around 50 houses have been evacuated in the region, along with guests at the famous Blue Lagoon Resort, as lava inches closer to the popular tourist destination. It's night 5 of 6 for Taylor Swift fans in Toronto. The Eras Tour is the hottest show on the planet, and resale tickets are going for thousands of dollars apiece. As Eric Sorensen tells us, it's left many die-hard fans out in the cold and petitioning for lawmakers to do something about it.
The lucky ones who got in. The simple economics of supply and demand, more buyers than seats, explains why Taylor Swift tickets are easily resold for a profit. But prices have gone so high, many Swifties can't possibly afford them.
I would have to pay 1, 2, 3 months rent for a single ticket, and I simply could not do that.
Ontario's opposition NDP has introduced a motion to curb unscrupulous buyers who try to corner the market on tickets.
Bots and people who have not even been fans have snatched up available tickets to resell them for extortionist prices. We want to help create a fair, competitive marketplace.
Looking for Taylor Swift tickets? Originally, some tickets right by the stage were $650 Canadian. Here's what we found for this Saturday night in Toronto. On Vivid Seats, $11,000 for a single seat. SeatGeek, also down front, $11,000. StubHub in the same location, around $8,000. So maybe up in the cheap seats, the nosebleed sections. Originally, prices there less than $200 a ticket. Now on StubHub, $4,800 for Saturday's show. At SeatGeek, $4,500. And at Vivid Seats, $4,500. You can shop around, but there are no bargains. Many feel exploited by everything from requirements to be verified fans to fake ticket scams. But even legally, ticket prices have shot through the roof, prompting a petition where names are being added daily, urging Ottawa to curb profit margins and bring in enforceable regulations on resale tickets.
The first challenge for the government is going to be, what are excessive profit margins? I don't know that that we can solve this through government regulation. I think it's a bigger conversation.
For now, demand for the most popular act on the planet will keep ticket prices out of reach for many fans. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Straight ahead, day one of the Halifax Security Forum with defense spending front and center. Halifax is hosting an international security forum, and military spending is topping the agenda. About 300 people from 60 countries are participating. Defense Minister Bill Blair says Canada is aware it needs to shell out more on defense to protect our territory and other countries like Ukraine. As Heidi Petrachik reports, the world is facing an increasingly diverse range of threats.
A statue paying tribute to Ukrainian immigrants of the past stands in front of this year's Halifax Security Forum. Inside, Canada's Minister of National Defence repeated the pledge to meet NATO's 2% defence spending target, albeit by 2032.
I've told them you're pushing on an open door. We are going to make those investments. We know that we need to do more.
And Bill Blair told the forum a surface-to-air defence system Canada bought 2 years ago has finally arrived in Ukraine. The urgency increasing after the Kremlin fired a new intermediate-range ballistic missile at Ukraine Thursday, retaliation for Kyiv's use of American and British long-range missiles.
The decision has to come quicker.
Belarusian activist and one-time presidential candidate Andrei Sanikov was jailed in a KGB facility for opposing his country's authoritarian government, which aligns itself with Putin. Part of the equation he feels has been ignored.
Because Belarus is the key factor. It has to be free. And then Ukraine and the rest of Europe will be free.
And while current conflicts like Ukraine are largely fought on the ground, there's also a fight for hearts and minds. Disinformation seen as a global threat, according to a poll released on the forum's first day. The Ipsos survey found 76% of people from 30 countries see disinformation being used to influence public opinion as a real threat. And it's slightly higher in Canada at 77%. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump isn't here, of course, but he is top of mind. And what he will do when it comes to global conflicts, such as the war on Ukraine, is a big question mark here. Bill Blair said today that he's confident Canada's allies will do what it takes to bring an end to the war there. Carolyn.
Heidi Petrachik in Halifax, thank you. The power of recycling. How discarded vape pen batteries are charging e-bikes like this one. We'll explain coming up. Sales of disposable e-cigarettes have risen sharply in recent years. The trend isn't just raising concerns about health, but also about our environment. Many vape users don't realize that each device contains a battery made from precious metals that are potentially toxic. But as Redmond Shannon shows us, one young engineer has found a way to give old vape batteries a new purpose.
Chris Dole in his happy place. When he's not designing electric vehicles for a major car maker, he's at home tinkering in his workshop.
I've been building all sorts of
crazy, wacky inventions. And this is essentially my latest creation.
A homemade e-bike, but with a very special variation to its voltage.
And these are what I use to power the e-bike.
Disposable single-use vape pens. Each has a lithium-ion battery that can be reused, potentially hundreds of times.
Especially as they're marketed as disposable, everyone thinks that they are inherently built of disposable components, and we're throwing away rare earth materials that quite frankly absolutely should not be going in the landfill.
It's estimated almost 5 million vapes are thrown away in the UK every week, most in the trash or on sidewalks.
Almost all my friends and family, every time I see them from another city, they'll hand me a bag of just all these vapes that they've collected just from walking around. It's foraging for gold in my eyes, because these are so valuable.
It took Dole 6 weeks to combine 130 of them to get this.
There we go.
A battery unit that he says can take the bike on quite a commute.
So we'll power it up. Without any pedalling, I got it to 32 kilometres. So with pedalling, I can probably push about 50.
There you are. Time for a test drive then.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. 130 vape pens are powering me, and I am moving, really moving.
To avoid the risk of fire, Dole warns not to try this at home. Next up, he wants to make a power wall from vapes for his workshop, but time is running out. Single-use vapes will be banned in the UK next year. Dole thinks that can't come soon enough. Redmond Shannon, Global News, Rugby, England.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada is Highway 93 in Jasper National Park, Alberta. We love to see your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow.